Our next guest is here to talk about so many different issues, including the presidential candidates' economic plans, also the anti-DEI backlash taking place by some big U.S. companies. You can add Ford and Lowe's to that list. Last week, they said separately they're going to be scaling back some of those efforts. Also want to get into Elon Musk and what's taking place in Brazil over the weekend. And if you'd indulge me, where I actually want to start talking about the economic plans is a video that went viral last week where Joe and Becky had an opportunity to interview Elizabeth Warren about unrealized tax gains, and that has caused a lot of consternation on all sides.
Well, this is one of the worst tax ideas that's floating around. And it's one of the worst tax ideas, not in the abstract, not in the academic halls, but, in America where we have had a different dynamism. The ability, the flywheel of capital and talent and technology going on, that is driven by our tax system, by the willingness of Americans to take after-tax dollars and invest them in risky ventures that may not pay off for years. Okay, so I happen, as you know,
there's more. We don't disagree about this issue as it relates to unrealized tax gains.
Do people think there's like a technology fairy?
No, but my question to you then is, assuming we're not going to do that, and by the way, one of the reasons that that's even put forth is a view that if you don't put something on the table that's taxing those gains annually like this, and if you were to put something out there that said, you can capture the gains later, that potentially a different party, a Republican Party or something else would get into power later, undo whatever the policies were to capture the gains properly in the future, and therefore you'd actually never capture any taxes. My question to you is, how do you feel, for example, about Bill Ackman?
That's such an ivory tower.
Well, but there's a practical reality to it, which is we haven't dealt with those folks who take loans, as you know, against their unrealized gains and effectively have those gains. Should that be taxed, for example?
You know what, Andrew? Something like that, where someone says, "Okay, I'm going to take a loan and I'm bringing forward my realization of those gains." I'm very happy to look at that. That's a very narrow issue. Okay. So I'm very happy to look. That's a discussion that.
How would you feel about dealing with step up at death? If you do, all of these things have a huge implication on the system, which is to say, if you dealt with step up at death, right? If you dealt with this loan issue, you take the incentive away for those things to happen, and therefore those things would get taxed in a way that are somewhat considered proper. If you dealt with carried interest, I'm saying there's low-hanging fruit here.
Okay, but we're talking carried interest. We're talking about something that scores at $40 billion over 10 years or something.
And therefore you wouldn't do it?
No, I'm just saying that those discussions I'm happy to have. This idea that we're going to take this fundamental and uniquely American system, the one that has lifted the entire world out of the COVID malaise because of technology, because of our investments in energy, we're pumping 40% more gas than we did when Trump took office. We're pumping a third more oil. You know why? Because we invest in the technology to make that happen.
But here's the issue. The reason why that proposal, this unrealized gain proposal, has any oxygen at all, I would argue to you, and as you know, I don't subscribe to that policy, but the reason it has any oxygen is because the Republican Party has not provided any oxygen to the low-hanging fruit issues, the step up at death, the issues around taking those loans, the issues around carried interest. If those things were taken off the table, we wouldn't even be having these conversations.
I don't believe that for a second.
No,
this is all about pandering to the idea that the wealthy don't pay their fair share. That's how this is cast.
We'll never get enough.
And it's. Let me give you two other things that bother me about this that you're not hearing. One is this incentivizes the government to create inflation. If you're going to tax the gain in a price, prices go up when inflation goes up.
Smart point.
So the government is incented to increase prices. And look, if something goes from $100 to $200 because of inflation, you haven't gained anything. But you're going to pay the government
the real viral nature of that discussion wasn't so much on the unrealized gains; it was on price controls and just the notion.
Joe, that's my other point. What are price controls? They're the government setting prices. When you're taxing unrealized gain, who decides the price? I mean, we have a market price in the market, but
immediately
the government does.
Because of the backlash from the right and left, they immediately tacked to say that it's not about price controls. It's an anti-gouging.
That was nonsense.
I know.
But
what it really was a way to try to deflect what caused the inflation. And you can say it was a pandemic and reopening. You can say whatever you want. But there was definitely some fire or some fuel thrown, some gasoline thrown on the post-pandemic environment from all the stimulus.
And I heard your interview with Elizabeth Warren. It was fantastic. One of the things that she always fails to recognize is that markets are more competitive today than they ever have been because the ability to look at prices. You know, I can look at
the internet. Yeah.
The internet on my phone. I'm driving down the highway. I can look at the 5 gas stations that are within 30 miles and go to the lowest cost one.
So very interesting, and I agree with you when it comes to gas stations. Mm-hmm. I don't agree in the same way about supermarkets. I'm actually curious where you land on that, because the supermarket space is becoming increasingly consolidated. Mm-hmm. There's a real question as to what the pricing that's happening at supermarkets really is. I think by the way, there's been a lot of idiosyncratic issues. Joe brought up with Elizabeth Warren the issues of the real issues around egg pricing and other things. But having said that, the consolidation of the stores themselves has made it pricing a more complicated topic. I think that's
for supermarkets.
I looked at this because you made this point last time I was on.
It's Walmart and Amazon now. I mean, Kroger and Albertsons. That's not where the problem is.
Well, that's the question.
And the Costco's.
Right.
I mean, you go out to the we shop at the Costco in Brooklyn.
Yep.
It's an unbelievable. I mean, the amount of volume that gets driven through there, therefore driving prices lower, and the amount of people who are there shopping, you know, it is remarkable. I looked at the inflation around grocery stores pre-pandemic. The prices were coming down for the
If you enforce monopoly laws and antitrust laws, doesn't the market take care of someone trying to gouge?
Well, that's what
immediately.
And the question is whether they are.
Let me tell you the industries that bother me where you can't see prices.
Instead of actually
education.
Right.
Education,
healthcare. We can go through the list.
They're the ones where government is involved.
Andrew, instead of trying to say, well, bacon in New York costs this, bacon out in the Midwest costs this, we're going to put a cap. Instead of trying to do that, just mind your P's and Q's on the antitrust stuff.